All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Pocketed. Good morning and welcome back after the long weekend. We're just going to wait a minute here for everyone to get in the room. We're excited to have a really great hiring grants power session for you this morning. We're going to dive into all of the details. So just waiting here for everyone, and feel free to share in the chat where you're joining in from. We'd love to hear from you and just connect. I'm sure we have folks from all over the country. Even just from Jamie and myself, my colleague Jamie here and I. Jamie is in Halifax and I am in BC, so on Salt Spring Island. So we're excited to hear where you're all from. And I'll just give everyone another couple of seconds here. Got a good group. Victoria. Yes, indeed. In Toronto. Nice to see that, Matthew. From Toronto, lots from Toronto, Newfoundland, Mississauga, Winnipeg. Hello from Vancouver. I was expecting it to be really hot and sunny here this weekend, and then it was a little cooler, which was probably some respite. Yes, indeed, Salt Spring Island still going strong. Right on. Nice to see you all from Toronto. Definitely split the difference in Calgary. Hopefully you're avoiding the smoke there. Newfoundland, nice. Good showing from the East Coast. Sweet. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. So again, my name is Mary and I've got my colleague Jamie here. We are so glad to see you all after the long weekend. We are really excited to dive into a hiring grants power session today. We're going to get into all of the details about what hiring grants are, where you can find them, and how you can start accessing that grant funding for your business. Hiring grants are definitely one of the most accessible ways to get started with grants. We recommend them very strongly to all business owners for lots of reasons that we'll fill you in on. And we've used them extensively at Pocketed as well as we've started up the business. So we do have some expertise in them, which we're excited to share with you. So we're both going to have our eye on the chat here too, and we do encourage you to put any of your questions using the Q&A function. That will make sure that we don't miss them. We are going to have some Q&A at the end as well, and we'll make sure to do our best to answer all of your questions. And if we don't get to everything today, we are going to be holding these hiring grant power sessions fairly regularly, at least once every month or two. So we'll have more opportunities to answer your questions, and we'll be sure to share our email as well. So getting started here, I'm actually going to pass it over to my colleague Jamie, and she's going to take the floor here for a minute to start filling you in on all the details about hiring grants. Over to you,
Thanks,
Jamie.
Mary. Thank you. Nice to see so many folks here. I do hope you had an awesome weekend. And I do hope you're ready to think about growing your team because, as Mary mentioned, hiring grants are really, really powerful. Grants in general are super powerful. So every year, the government of Canada invests close to $6 billion. That is a reinvestment, if you will. It's our taxpayer dollars translated into grants to the tune of about $6 billion in business funding. So these are grants that are available to all sorts of businesses. You do not have to be a major manufacturing player or building a technology startup. There is money out there if you're in manufacturing or tech, but if you're a brick and mortar business, if you're selling your services, there is definitely money for you out there. So here at Pocketed, we talk about a few key categories of grants. If you want to switch to the next, yeah, perfect, Mary. The one before would be great. So we talk about hiring funding. That's what we're here to chat about. There's also capital expenditure money, sustainability money, R&D money. But really the one that is relevant to everyone is hiring, right? Because regardless of your stage, we know very deeply from experience here at Pocketed that adding people to your team can really move the needle on the projects you need to get done in order to grow your business. So when we talk about hiring grants, there's some exceptions to this list, but I will say that there are 5 key categories of hiring grants. So really, these are based on what type of candidate you're bringing onto your team. So those would be students, youth, which are actually in some ways past students. So with student, there's no age requirement. With youth, that typically means 30 or younger. Academic hires. So if you're needing to do testing or you need the support of a lab or you need to do some research project, there's definitely hiring money out there for that. There's also lots of money for folks who are newly immigrated to Canada, as well as people at the provincial level who are unemployed. So keep that in mind. We'll dive a bit more into what a successful candidate is going to look like with these hiring grants. But first, I just want to share on these next slides really why we love hiring grants so much. And just as a bit of my background, I came to Pocketed from a funder where I actually built 4 different federally funded hiring programs. And I had the deep pleasure in the first program I built of, in the span of 18 months, onboarding close to 650 different employers across Canada, and really helping them figure out how people, again, people can move the needle on the projects that you want to get done. So I do personally love hiring grants, but here are some specific reasons why. When it comes to hiring money, wage subsidies, those are offered by both the federal and the provincial government. Sometimes we even see them offered municipally, and you can stack them. So that means whereas one program might give you 50% and another program might give you 30% of someone's wages, you can bring those together for the same hire and cover 80% of wages. Now, you can't profit off of this stacking, so you need to make sure that everything is going towards the actual wages paid, but they are regularly stackable. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 would absolutely be that there's tons of intake cycles. So there are many very powerful grants outside of hiring that are only open once a year for like 3 weeks. That's not the case with hiring money. Now, I can't promise that there's always going to be a wage subsidy exactly for the candidate that you want at the exact moment you want it, but I can promise that most of these hiring subsidies, if they're not open year round, have 3 intakes per year. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to wait too long to get started. Third reason I love hiring grants would absolutely be that you don't have to just use one at a time, and you can absolutely hire more than one employee at a time. So if you really are in a growth phase and a team of salespeople or an HR person and a software developer would benefit your team, there's no reason that you can't leverage either multiple programs or the same program, but for multiple hires. Another reason that I love hiring grants is that sometimes with certain programs, you can fund the same hire more than once. This is very common with student hiring grants. And when we say students, that can be, depending on the funder, someone who's enrolled part-time, full-time, pursuing an undergrad, or even a certificate at a college, or even in a master's or a PhD. So student funding is actually quite flexible. And there are many funders who will give you a wage subsidy for multiple semesters. So that's pretty cool. Last but not least, hiring grants are not that hard. There's definitely things to learn, but as a rule, these are not applications that you're going to spend, days and days and days of your time executing. The other thing is that doing it once can really mean you'll learn a lot. Doing it once or twice means you'll learn a lot, whether it's working with a grant writer here at Pocketed or doing it on your own. Once you've gone through the process once or twice, it's really easy to keep engaging with these funders for wage subsidies as you're adding more employees to your team. So here's one example. You were hearing me talk about student hiring grants. There's a beautiful federal program called the Student Workplace Program that offers between 50 or 70% of a student's wages covered in a 4-month period. So again, they're open 3 times a year. Now, what's tricky about this is that there are actually 18 different delivery agents for this single program. And actually, the way they define student and the exact requirements that they have differs. So this is a really powerful way, in fact, that Pocketed can support you, helping you figure out which is the best funder for your specific student and your specific role. An example of a youth hiring grant would be the very beloved Digital Skills for Youth. That's the next slide, Mary. Oh, my bad. Excuse me. How do I get 70% for my intern? So you might have just clocked that I said those student work placement program grants give you 50 or 70%. The trigger for the hire subsidy is actually the identity criteria of the hire. So when they're applying to the program, giving the paperwork that we need to proceed, they'll let us know if they meet any of these identity groups. So if they're racialized, if they're a first-year student, if they self-identify as having a disability, if it's a female identifying intern studying science, technology, engineering, or math, if they self-identify as Indigenous, or if they've immigrated to Canada in the last 5 years. Technically, that's achieved PR or citizenship status in the last 5 years. That's going to trigger the 70% wage subsidy. All right, so as previously promised. The very beloved Digital Skills for Youth grant is an example of youth hiring. So different than student, and that is on the next slide there, Mary. I don't know if folks can see it yet, but I still see. Yeah, so this one's amazing, and it's not been flowing for the last year, but we have heard that it will be available again, likely this fall. So they're in the process of picking new delivery agents. This is actually 100% wage subsidy, albeit delivered as a reimbursement. So you do need to pay your hire upfront, but you will get back 100% of their wages over a 26-week period if they are 30 or younger in a digitally immersive role and have self-identified as under or unemployed. So lots of flexibility here. This exact program is genuinely how we built Pocketed. We got quite a few of these grants in our early days and had a 95% grant funded team. This is a really powerful one. And we also, this is also one that we can help you with. I'm just gonna grab a quick drink of water while Mary flips the slide. So this is an academic grant, just one example. MyTax is a beautiful funder. All of their programs include an academic partner. So your intern or your hire would actually have access, whether it was to a lab or have the oversight of a professor. MyTax is also awesome in that they will give you money and they will allow international students. As a general rule, hiring grants have to be used for Canadian citizens or permanent residents. MyTax is one of the few exceptions to that. An example on the next slide of the newcomer program. There's a couple different programs, whether it's the Foreign Credential Recognition Program, there's a Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program, but basically these are programs that are prioritizing supporting folks who have been trained abroad in their discipline, newly immigrated to Canada and looking to get a foot in the door in our workforce. So this is an example of the iAdvance Pathways. I believe it's only available to folks in Nova Scotia, BC, British Columbia and Ontario, but there are other examples of programs like this, and they tend to be industry focused. So this one is for an IT professional who got their credentialing abroad. You can get up to $15,000 to hire them for your team. And then last but not least, when we talk about unemployment grants or incentives to hire unemployed folks, these are typically delivered at the provincial level. Almost every province has a version of it. Where Allison is in Newfoundland, it's called Jobs NL. And in BC, it's the Work BC wage subsidy. So lots of different options here. These would be delivered through usually your labor ministry, and they have varying levels, but to the tune of usually about $15K that they'll give you when you're hiring somebody, sometimes for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, it differs by program. So I'll pause there because those are lots of different, that's a lot of data, but just to underscore that these programs abound. And navigating them can be complicated. So Mary's going to share some tips that are really good things just to know about all hiring grants. And we'll also make sure that you understand how Pocketed can help you navigate these options later on.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, and thanks for your questions. We're going to get to some of these questions just in a few moments, but I do want to talk about eligibility today because there are 3 different factors of accessing hiring grants, and we talk about it a lot with different users. Really, really important to remember. We talk about the trifecta of eligibility. So first, your candidate has to be eligible, and that is such a crucial piece of accessing these hiring grants. We're going to get more into the specifics of how they can make sure they're eligible. Secondly, your company has to be eligible. So often there will be like a pre-approval process where you're submitting the first part of the application as the employer, just making sure that you're ticking all the boxes as the employer. The good thing about the hiring programs, though, is that as a company, there is a very low barrier to entry in terms of eligibility requirements on your part. So that's really great. And third is that the role needs to be eligible. And often where you see that is hiring grants will have, the different delivery agencies will have their different mandates that they're trying to fulfill. And they want to make sure, so for instance, if it's a hiring grant that is really focused on a tech, creating tech jobs and in the tech industry, they might want that role to be fairly tech focused. Or maybe it's another industry, maybe it's the hospitality industry, and they want to make sure that that role is also very focused on that industry. So we do need to be a bit mindful of what this hiring program is really trying to accomplish and making sure that we're fulfilling that role as well so that it's an easy win for them. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide here. So talking about company eligibility, really what the great thing about hiring programs, again, is that they are so widely accessible. So really they're open to any small business, startup, social enterprise, or nonprofit. So as long as you fit the definition of an SME, which is that you have more than one but less than 500 employees, you are good to go. So that can be pretty much industry agnostic. So any type of business that you're running, for the most part, you'll be eligible. And the last component is that you are willing to provide a safe and supportive internship for your student or your youth or whoever your candidate that you're bringing on. So of course, that just means that, as all employers, we're expected to provide a safe and supportive environment. I will add as well that for some hiring programs, especially the ones that are student focused, there sometimes can be also a work integrated learning component. And that sometimes means that the student will need to be registered in an official co-op program or have some kind of documentation stating that that internship needs to be part of their program. So we can get into that more. But generally for companies, it's quite wide and accessible. So really exciting that everyone can get into that. Candidate eligibility is such a crucial component, like I said, always important to revisit this again and again. So for students hiring grants specifically, the student needs to be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, or have official refugee status. And what that means is, and also this applies to newcomer grants as well, is that unfortunately international students or those on work permits are not eligible to apply. So yeah, that's just unfortunately part of how the government runs the programs. They do need to be domestic citizens or permanent residents. So we need to keep that in mind when we're looking for our candidates. Okay, so how hiring grants work. So there are often multiple stages to securing the grants. And that being said, though, it doesn't mean that the stages are all necessarily very complex. It just means that we need to have some patience through that process as we're filling out and going through that process. So like I said, the first stage is often an employer sort of pre-approval. It just means that it's a form that you're filling out, providing some information about your company and some general information about the role that you're trying to fill. Once you get approved for that, you're going to submit your candidate info, and that's when your candidate is going to need to provide all of their documentation around their citizenship or their permanent residency status. And if it's a student role as well, they're going to need to provide documentation. Usually that means that they're going to need to be registered at a registered post-secondary institution in Canada. So they're going to need to provide proof of registration. Often that means that they are registered for the work term that you're getting the subsidy for. So sometimes that can mean they are taking part-time courses or maybe just taking one course, or they have an active registration and they're returning in the fall. Oh, and Jamie's disappeared. Hopefully she's coming back. There you are. So sorry, you're going to submit your candidate info. Once you do get approved for your funding, you are still, like all grants, they do work on reimbursement. Once in a while, you'll find a hiring program that is able to pay you in installments throughout the term, but honestly, those are more rare than not. For the most part, you're going to be expected to have enough cash flow to pay that employee for the bulk of their work term. And then you're going to submit your final reporting at the end, which is usually done through pay stubs. And then you're going to get your reimbursement. So just be aware of that process. It can take some time, but definitely good ROI at the end of it all. So let's talk about choosing the right delivery agent. So like Jamie mentioned, there are over 18 different delivery agents, as we call them, or funding agencies that deliver these programs. And so some important considerations: when you log into your Pocketed account, you may see a lot of different hiring grants. I think there's even a little filter you can use to filter by hiring type. So you're going to see lots of different delivery agents that are often based on location. A lot of them are provincial. You may see some, again, that are industry focused, and that can be great. If you're in one of those industries that is catering to building the workforce, you'll be able to access specific funding for your industry. So again, you want to make sure that you have a suitable role that is going to work with the mandates of that delivery agency, whether it's like maybe they're trying to encourage, clean tech innovation. Maybe they're trying to encourage building jobs in the trucking industry. As we've just discovered, there's a big trucking fund. There's hospitality, there's tourism, there's a lot of hiring funds in the food preparation and the food processing industry. So you just want to do a little bit of digging and reading there and making sure that you're finding a delivery agent that is really suitable, and that's the right one for you. You want to definitely get familiar with their process. All of them have a slightly different nuanced process of how they accept applications. So just take a few minutes to read those details and make sure that you understand how they like to receive applications, and also their timeline process. And we can talk about that as well. Normally, there are 3 different intakes throughout the year. So, and they're often like a term of lead time. So for instance, all of our hiring programs now are about to open again for fall hiring. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting your ducks in a row about 3 to 4 months ahead of time so that you can access the funding that's going to be coming open in the next term. You want to make sure that you're getting familiar with their reporting requirements. Like we mentioned, most hiring programs work on pay stubs. So that means that you're going to need to get payroll set up, and we'll talk about that a bit more later, so that you can submit adequate reporting and making sure that you're getting your reimbursements. And then again, as Jamie mentioned, they will have different payment structures. Some will pay in installments. For the most part, you're going to find that they will pay at the end of the work term. And Jamie, just let me know if when it's you're going to jump in again, because I may have lost track of where we are.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, no, I can take over now. And I think I can address too. I know there's some great questions. They're all excellent in the chat. And I think I can get to some of these. But just to underscore one thing that Mary just said, to Matt's question in the Q&A there, typically you do need to add folks on payroll. All right. So Mary did just share that. Typically pay stubs are required. And it's probably something we should have started with. So if we zoom out a bit and we think about all funding, all business funding, which is really the shared mandate of all of these grants, whether it's R&D funding or hiring subsidies, is to drive economic prosperity. What's a massive way that the government counts that? It's by jobs created. So that's really what you're doing for Canada when you're getting this wage subsidy, is you are creating a job and you're creating a new taxpayer, right? When you put them on payroll, you and the employee are thus then contributing to CPP and EI and all of the other good tax bases that actually fund these programs. So in my probably 5-6 years of working in this space, very with a lot of concentration, have seen one program that gave a wage subsidy for a contractor. Putting folks on payroll is almost always required. And then to Allison's question, also in the chat, grants are typically for new hires. So sometimes we can get you funding for someone that you already have on payroll, whether that's because they've been a contractor for you and you're going to make them a payroll employee and thus leverage a wage subsidy program, or more commonly, if they're a student or someone who becomes a student, you can typically leverage a student wage subsidy. But again, when we think about what the government wants to take credit for, it's creating new jobs. So if you've already got someone on payroll, you're already paying them, and there's no change to their role, no increase to their hours, it's unlikely that the government is going to invest in that with a hiring grant. And then lastly, while I'm on it, just to Faith's question, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, Faith, so feel free to put things in, but definitely student wage subsidy programs, they are very, very often a company's first hire. So you do not need to have a person on staff already to use a wage subsidy, right? These programs are designed to increase the size of your team. So let's use one and get you your first employee. So again, when we're talking about barriers to these grants, as Mary mentioned, every hiring grant you need to get 3 key areas deemed eligible. You, the company, the specific candidate, and the role that they're filling. So not paying attention to all 3 aspects is a very common mistake. Another one would be not moving fast enough. So even though these grants are available every, many times a year, some of them can come and go very quickly. And so being prepared is definitely a big one. And I do see your question here at the very top, Zen. You don't have to have a candidate to start this process. I am on the next slide, Mary, if you want to flip over. You don't have to have a candidate to start the process, but you do typically have to have a candidate to fully claim your funding spot. Now, some of these programs actually have talent pools. So you need to start the application and then they'll connect you with their candidate base. But definitely, I would say a big barrier is not moving quickly enough. And usually that obstacle to speed is not having some potential candidates lined up. The next barrier, got so many lists in this presentation. Payroll seems daunting. Folks, listen, like all this stuff is daunting the first time you do it, right? The first hiring grant, the first time you register a business, the first time you try to get your first customer, firsts are hard. And so we get that. And that's absolutely what we want to support you with. But I promise, not quite back yet from the weekend. I promise that payroll is a lot simpler than it can seem. So we can make recommendations of apps that are very cost effective, like you pay a few dollars per pay run. The CRA has a beautiful service where they help newly unincorporated or newly incorporated businesses make sure that their payroll deductions accounts are all set up. Those are totally free supports. So believe you me, we can help you with payroll. And then again, once it's done, that's going to unlock, as I mentioned, 99% of the wage subsidies for you. Another barrier would be the one before, actually, Mary. Oh, no, I went ahead too far on my end. My bad. Is the cash flow constraint. So we get it. You do need to have this money in hand to pay with most programs for at least half of the placement period before you get any reimbursement. That's assuming that the funder gives a midpoint reimbursement. And this is a hard pill to swallow about all grants. They are far and away issued as reimbursements. Again, we think about our risk-adverse government. It's scary to just give people money when there's no pay stub to prove that they've been paying someone, or there's no project report to prove that you've done what you said you were going to do with grant money. So as much as I wish this wasn't the case, you do need to have a little bit of money in hand to support these hires. But absolutely, once you get one of these wage subsidies, it will stretch out those dollars that you do have, and those reimbursements. Once you sign the funding contract, those reimbursements are absolutely going to come your way. And then last but not least, I was trying to get here, and I kind of alluded to this one. We get it. Hiring is hard. It's hard to, we're all in it, right? Mary and I are helping to build Pocketed. We are in this business, and sometimes it's hard to bring our gaze up and think about what needs to happen 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road. We do have partnerships with this that can help. And yeah, so we're happy to give some more tips when it comes to hiring, but having those eligible candidates in hand is absolutely what's going to help you leverage this money. So I think I'm passing it back to you now, Mary.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk again a little bit about how you can set yourself up for success. Number one thing is maybe the most difficult, but once you get in the groove, it can feel so much more you get used to the feeling is what I'm trying to say. And that is to plan ahead and hire early. And what that means is that you're always sort of on the lookout for candidates for the next term, because we know that grants are cyclical. We know that hiring grants are cyclical, that they open up, roughly every 4 months, in the spring, in the fall, and in the winter for the following term. So if we're always that 3 months ahead of time and we're looking for candidates for that next run, then we're able to get ahead of the game and start planning, which is makes it so much more feasible, right, for our businesses. So that's definitely one thing that we can do. The other thing is to consider all those 3 elements of eligibility and really consider them like in the context of your business. Like, what does that mean? Go into your Pocketed account. What industry am I in? What kind of funding do I actually want? What kind of programs or what kind of roles am I trying to fill? Maybe there's a delivery agency that is specific to that type of role that I can access over and over again for multiple interns over years. So trying to be strategic in that way and see if you can identify those delivery agents ahead of the time, and then also looking for candidates that are going to be suitable for those roles. So we do have a lot of different product tools on the Pocketed platform that as users, you're welcome to download for free anytime. They can help you write job descriptions, post for those roles, go through those interview processes, and start to plan to have interns coming in through your business on the regular so that you can really access and leverage that funding to the maximum effect. Like I said, again, choosing the right delivery agent. So that just again goes back to focusing on your industry, focusing on your business stage, and any sort of industry focus that you might have it's only going to help you, right? Setting up payroll, again, it's not as scary as it seems. I did say in the chat, we do sometimes recommend Wave apps, I know, and there are many more out there. Luckily, payroll is not the barrier that it used to be. It's very, very low barrier to get it set up now for a low entry fee. I think Wave is like $25 a month and then a small additional fee for every employee. And that's great because it means that it doesn't need to be a big hurdle anymore to set that up. And there was another question as well about, do these candidates all need to be full-time? Because again, that is quite a commitment as a business owner to take on a full-time employee. And again, it depends. It comes down to the program delivery agency. There are some that require full-time, but there are many that also are open to part-time roles. Sometimes there'll usually be a range. It'll have to be a minimum of a certain number of hours, but it's definitely not always 40. So worth it to do a little bit of reading there and see what you can find. Yeah, and then the last tip for success is to complete your reporting on time. It's sort of like going to college. You need to hand in your assignments on time. And it is important. Of course, you want to get your money. So being organized right from the get-go, making sure you have copies of all of that employee's pay stubs and any other deliverables that the grant agency is going to be requiring you to submit. Just having those templates at the ready so that you can fill them out easily and make sure that you get your report done to make sure that you get your money back quickly. That's all going to help you succeed. And how can Pocketed help? So the good news is that Pocketed, have definitely lived it with hiring grants on so many levels and so many different funding agencies. We understand the learning curve can be really steep. And we've also designed it to be modular so that we can really meet you wherever you're at. We understand that a lot of business owners, are very new to grants and want a lot of extra support in navigating even just which delivery agents to go after, how to get candidates through the door, et cetera. So we've got a few different options because we want to give you that flexibility to access the services that you need. So we've got 3 different options. The first is a training session, which is something quite new that we're launching. We're excited about. And this is really for you if you feel quite confident about grants, you have a candidate ready, you know what you want and you know how to get it, but you really just need a little bit of extra support, maybe going through that first application process. We know that it's in some ways it's a muscle that you build, and the first time you do it can feel really daunting, and then once you're over the hump, you're good to go. So if that's you, then we can help you with it. We'll screen share, we'll sit down with you, we'll go through it with you, make sure that you're figuring it out on your own, and then you're really off to the races from there. We also do grant writing in-house, and this is really for you if you are feeling like you're eligible, you've got candidates, and you want to access this money, but you maybe just don't have the time to take this on, then we are definitely able to do that grant writing in-house for you. And generally, we take a 20% success fee, which makes it very low risk for you. So that means that you're only paying if you get approved. Last option is sort of a hiring and grant writing combo. If you love the idea of accessing grants for hiring, but you know that you don't have the time to either find candidates or write the applications, we have a partner that can work with you to both identify candidates, screen them, interview them, find you the right person, and also write the application for you. So that is definitely a service that we're providing as well. If you feel like that is you, then you can contact us and we can talk to you more about pricing for that as well. Okay, so it's time to take some more questions, and we've got some really juicy ones in the Q&A. So we have about just under 10 minutes to take a few more questions, and I will pass it back to Jamie. I'm also going to be monitoring the chat as well, but let's see what we can answer for you.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so Zen, I'll start at the top just for my own brain here. So it definitely can feel chicken and egg-y. Zen asked, the student has to be decided, right, to get the grant, but then what happens if you hire the student and you don't get the grant? So, and I think there's also another question about when does the grant process need to start and when does approval need to come? So on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, there are literally hundreds, if not maybe, I don't know, there's probably not 1,000, but there are hundreds and hundreds of different wage subsidy programs. So 2 bits of advice. As a rule, generally, you want to make sure that before you put someone on payroll, before you put a start date in a hiring contract, you are getting in touch with the funder. Sometimes you need to just initiate a grant application, and sometimes you need to be fully approved before the hire can start. So that really does differ by program. And again, that's something that totally a pocketed support could help you navigate. When it comes to, let's use a student hiring grant for an example, you want to hire the student, you've made an offer, they've sent in their transcript, et cetera, to the funder, but you're not approved yet, and you want them to be, you want to be able to make a commitment to them. What you can do is put the words pending funding in their offer of employment. So, John Doe, I'm making you an offer to be my marketing coordinator for the summer, pending successful approval of this funding program. And then you are technically within your legal rights to withdraw that offer of employment if you absolutely cannot hire them without the grant. I will also say that, those of us here at Pocketed who write hiring grants and have built hiring programs and really know this space well, as long as you're disclosing everything up front around the role and who the student is or the young person, we can troubleshoot in advance. So it's pretty rare that you're not going to get approved, again, if all three sides of that eligibility have been met. So that's another way Pocketed can help. Tamara or Tamara, Shelley. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I'm going to jump in here because I realize that, sorry. So some of you may not have accessed your Pocketed account yet. If you are still, maybe you've signed up, but you haven't accessed your free trial or signed up for a full account, I just want to say that we are offering a discount today. So I'm going to put the code in the chat. So if you haven't yet signed up, you can use the code hiring40 and you'll get 40% off of your Pocketed account. So you can get in there and start looking for hiring grants and using those filters and getting moving with that. Okay. And I'll put the link,
Mary.
Creating an account as well. Sorry.
No, please. That's great. So absolutely, you can always do a free trial of Pocketed. And as long as you put that hiring40 in, if you want to upgrade and keep it around for more than 2 weeks, it'll automatically take 40% off of that basic or the plus plan. Do note that the trial is only good for our basic plan, but that will let you see all of your grant matches. Tamara asked, do you have any advice how to assess for students with disabilities? You don't need to worry about that. This, again, going back to that slide of how do I trigger the higher subsidy amount, it's totally private. It's never going to be disclosed to you. All of that happens when the student self-identifies whether or not they come from a minority group, whether or not they have a disability, whether or not they're a newcomer. So unfortunately, that's not an element that you can control. But it is absolutely, there's lots of tips out there about creating accessible and accommodating workspaces. So if you are interested and open to recruiting folks that maybe have disabilities, disclosed or undisclosed, it's always an awesome idea to make that really clear in your job description, that you welcome requests for accommodation, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some hiring guides, again, in your Pocketed account. There's a cool resource section once you become a paying member where you can download some hiring guides, some job description tools. And we also have some blog posts as well about how to create accessible workplaces. To the next question, I'm just trying to cruise here because I know there's some great cues and we don't have a ton of time. Do you need enough cash flow? So I think we've already covered that. You do need to be able to pay your employee up front. And again, if you're using a student hiring grant, count on the 50% subsidy since it's up to the student's disclosure, and treat the 70% upgrade as a bonus if it comes your way. But the second part of Shanna's question, what if things go wrong with the employee? I get this question all the time. It is important to underscore that this is your employee, right? So you are absolutely within your rights to terminate if they are not performing. And ultimately, you will get the wage subsidy on whatever wages you've paid to date. So if you've gotten a wage subsidy that covers 16 weeks, but an employee only works for 3 weeks, you will get 3 weeks of a wage subsidy. Now, if you've gotten any money already, have you received any money that covers more than 3 weeks, you would be responsible for returning the unused portion based on the calculations from your pay stub to the funder. But do know, even if somebody doesn't work out with your company, whatever they've worked to date will be subsidized, even if you let them go. next up,
Jamie, a couple of people asked about the expanding on the 20% success fee. Maybe we can talk about that just a little.
yeah, please, you go ahead and I'll review these.
Sure. Yeah. So generally speaking, wage subsidies usually vary from like $5,000 to $7,000 per term. So at Pocketed, if we're doing that writing for you in house, we generally take a flat fee of $1,000, which works out to roughly 20%. So it's actually even less if you get the full $7,000, and then we collect that on success. So when we get you approved, then you would be invoiced for that $1,000. So just to be clear, if you change course or something and you decide not to use the grant, of course our fee still needs to be paid. But generally, we would hope that you would be moving forward with that since you now have the money. So happy to answer any further questions about that as well. I will just put our customer service email in the chat too, in case there are any further questions around accessing hiring grants through us.
Yeah, but to Zen's question, that essentially it's a professional services fee. You would absolutely get an invoice and you would absolutely be able to claim it as an expense. It's the same way if a lawyer writes a contract for you or a tax accountant prepares your annual return. These are grant writing fees, professional services that you absolutely could run through as a business expense. I do want to get to Roa's question. She or he asks, is there any grants that can allow you to hire and pay yourself as the founder of your startup? This is really tricky. So there are a few. They're usually if you are an academic spin out. So if you've started your company while you were doing a PhD, you can then get money as a founder. Sometimes there's some money through a funder called IRAP, which unfortunately is by invitation only, but it is money. If you're building technology, sometimes a founder's wages can be covered. But again, back to my previous point, what the government cares about is job creation. And it's inherently seen as a conflict of interest to fund you, who's going to financially benefit from the success of your company with a wage subsidy. So I hope that makes sense. I will say it's unfortunately, I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense when we want to support entrepreneurship in this country. But unfortunately, it is relatively hard to find salary money for a founder.
Maybe lastly, we just want to touch on the success rate question.
Please, yeah.
A great question. And yeah, I can just speak to that, Zen. So the great news about hiring grants is that the barrier to entry is actually very low. So as long as your company, your candidate, and your role are meeting the eligibility criteria, then there's very little chance that you're going to get rejected. So in some ways, it's really just a matter of going through that process and making sure that you are eligible, your candidate is eligible, the role is eligible. And then the last thing is that these are first come, first serve. So making sure that you have all those pieces in place organized and that you're applying as soon as the doors open. In that case, there's very, very little reason why you're going to get rejected. So that's why we also encourage everyone to really go after these programs because they are so accessible to so many different business owners. So I hope that helps. We're coming up to time here. We've really appreciated all of your questions. And once again, yeah, we definitely want to, okay, there's a different code here. You can also use Hiring Grants March 2023. You can also use Hiring 40. We have a few of them floating around. We definitely encourage you to create your Pocketed account if you haven't already. And if you have to, certainly log in, start searching for hiring grants. They are going to be opening again in the fall. It's really exciting. And start looking for your candidates. Think about all the ways you can be building your business, which is exciting. Jamie, do you have any last words?
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't wait to get started, folks. I hope that on the one hand, this presentation underscores that, yeah, there's a lot to learn, even about just one section of grants. But we're pretty proud of the tool we've built here at Pocketed, and we're pretty proud of the service support. So really the main thing that keeps people from getting grant money is not getting started. So try the free trial, start exploring programs. Mary runs an awesome free office hours a couple times a week. You can come join her in Zoom, ask questions. And if and when you're ready to upgrade to a grant consultation with my team or grant writing with Mary and the rest of our team, we're really here to help you. But there is a bit of an on-ramp. So don't on the one hand, if you're overwhelmed, come see us again. But also if you're overwhelmed, make your Pocketed account and start playing around. There's absolutely money out there for folks that can move the needle in your business. Students are an amazing resource. This Digital Skills for Youth program that will be reopening is highly lucrative. So please join the rest of the entrepreneurs that are getting the wage subsidies. And we'd love to support you when you're ready. Really
Absolutely.
nice to be with you all.
Yeah. And I'll just say one last time, if you are interested in booking one of the training sessions or talking to us about grant writing services or our hiring services as well, best way to do that is to email us at hello@hellopocketed.io. And I've just put that email again in the chat. So you can just email us directly, reach out to us about your situation, and we'll be able to connect with you and move that forward for you. Okay. So yes, if you're interested in becoming a referral partner, then please do email us as well. We can talk to you about that offline. Yeah, and I think that we've addressed everything. So we will be sending out this recording later on today or early tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And I think that we've covered most of the questions, which is great. So we appreciate you being here, taking time out of your day after the long weekend to think about hiring grants. It's been a great pleasure to see you all and to chat with you. So we will see you again at the next education series session, which is going to be in 2 weeks. It's going to be all about pitching your business. We're really excited about that. So stay tuned for those emails and you'll be able to register soon. All right. Have a wonderful day and nice to see you all.
Bye, folks. Take care.